Welcome to Juggernauts, presented by Aeon Counseling. My name is Jennifer Nakhai, and I'm the founder of Aeon Counseling and Consulting. And today we have a very special show for you because we're changing things up. We're going to bring extra information to you, and we have a very special guest today. Her name is Dr. Victoria Verlezza. And I met her on Instagram, believe it or not. And she's my favorite Instagrammer. And I'm loving her content. Please go follow her right away. We're going to be featuring information from previous shows that now have led to greater discussions. And so the reason why our guest today is not from Lynn specifically is because we're going to be talking about questions that Lynn folks have brought to me and that I think deserve some clarification in the moment. So Dr. Victoria Verlezza is a social justice warrior, educator, and diversity, equity, and inclusion coach. Is going to be talking to us a little bit more about the mission of what we are doing and what we're trying to accomplish here today. We're talking about intersectionality, guys. We're going to have to. Victoria, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing, Jen?
I'm good. I'm excited to have you on the show. I can't believe that from liking and sharing each other's stories, we're here today. So I appreciate the connection. I'm pretty sure it was Faustina who connected us.
I think so. I know, her mistake.
What a great mistake. Beautiful mistakes.
Beautiful.
So tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you've been up to. You have an incredible business. And tell us a little bit about history.
So hello, Lynn, and whoever else is tuning in. I'm Victoria, recently Dr. Victoria Verlezza. I am originally from the East Coast. I grew up in Connecticut, and I went to school actually in Massachusetts, in Worcester and Amherst. Have my multiple degrees. My undergrad degree is focused on psychology, women and gender studies, and Holocaust and genocide studies. I studied at Clark University in Worcester, Mass. I miss it quite a bit. And then I went on and I got a higher ed degree, higher education administration and social justice education. Go UMass Amherst. So that's where Faustina and I know each other from.
Nice.
And my passion and journey around social justice issues and racial justice issues really started at UMass. So about 12 years ago, I really started on this journey to become an educator, to talk to white folks, to talk to other folks about systems of oppression, systems of domination, to dismantle the systems that we are all socialized within. And here I am coaching and consulting and talking and providing content. I teach undergraduate students as well as grad students in the human development and psychology fields. I'm super passionate about this work. My dissertation focuses on racial identity development of emerging adults, so 18 to 29-year-olds, and the way in which social media impacts their development. And I feel as though these topics are so important, and the idea of intersectionality is so important because we don't really know what it means. It's being thrown around a whole lot, but we are all intersecting beings. We all have identities that need to be talked about. And I'm so excited that you invited me on today, Jen, because this is a worthwhile conversation, I think.
Absolutely. I've been paying attention to a lot of the conversations that are happening in our community around it. I'm very proud that we are at least talking about it, but there's some misconceptions, right? We still have to clarify. And I know from studying this in grad school that it's not a simple subject. It's actually rather complicated. And for me, it is difficult to articulate what it means off the top of my head and very quickly. So we've gathered some resources to go over today so that people can think about it. And really, until you do the work of reviewing your intersectionalities and your list of who you are and your identities in different areas, from socioeconomic to gender expression and sexual orientation, it gets complicated. And I think what I'm seeing is some folks are just talking about it in the context of sexuality, And that's 10% of it, maybe. It's so
It's a
much
sliver.
Yeah, it's just one small piece of it. So what is your definition of intersectionality? Like, how do you see it?
So I was taught about intersectionality in my undergraduate courses. It is actually a term that comes from Kimberly Crenshaw. She is a professor, an author. She coined the term in 1989. So the term intersectionality has been around for a long time. She believed that racism specifically did not stop with the Civil Rights Act. And so intersectionality actually was bred from this idea of the triple other. So woman, Black woman, and then sexuality or class, etc. So folks who are not white have multiple identities. And Kimberly Crenshaw says that intersectionality was for her a prism to bring to light the dynamics within discrimination law specifically. So from this definition, we have evolved intersectionality to the understanding of the nexus point between all of our identities. So for me, looking at someone's identity is like looking at a tapestry. So you can't just look at one single thread of a tapestry. You have to take them as they are and keep them together. You have to look at those intersecting points. I am not just one monolithic existing identity. I am, 10, 12 different identities. So this idea of intersectionality is really, really important because we are not single dimensional beings, right? Like we all have different ways of experiencing the world, and the way our socialization and the way that we are raised and the people who raise us, the regions that we are raised in, all of these impact the way in which we view the world. Therefore, it impacts the way in which our identities intersect and then how we examine that nexus point of intersection.
Can you say what a nexus point is?
Sure.
I'm just trying to clarify as much as possible because we have all sorts of distortions about it going on. And I want this to be part of our regular vocabulary. I want us talking about the different levels of intersectionality and how oppression can come at you from so many sides.
Absolutely.
Because I'm a woman, because I'm Hispanic, because of this, because of that.
Exactly.
How many reasons could there be to attack someone, right?
There are so many. So the intersectionality piece is understanding and honoring where all of our identities overlap or come together. So the fact that you, like you just said, you said Hispanic woman, you have two identities, right, that experience systemic oppression. You have intersecting identities that need to be examined together. You can't just take you, for example, Jen, as a one identity person. So the nexus point of this examination is looking at and honoring that these identities meet. So that tapestry cannot be taken apart. You cannot just look at one identity of the threads. Can't do it.
Beautiful. That's perfect. I found one specific definition that I thought was very beautiful. Intersectionality means interlocking systems of oppression.
Absolutely.
How much oppression can come your way at a time? A lot.
A lot.
The answer is actually that it's a lot.
It is a lot.
Too much, really. So because we are in this situation, this circumstance right now where oppression is a part of our daily lives, in other parts of the world more than where we are right now, of course, but we're still feeling it, and I want folks to be able to understand how it affects them so they can take action, right? So they understand and have the words and can articulate how it is that they're being affected. I know for me personally, it was pretty deep to learn these things, and I didn't realize that I could be hated for so many reasons. Right. Until I did my whole list, I was like, wow, this is terrible. How depressing.
Yeah.
but at the same time, how beautiful, right? And how we're going to show you colorful wheels that give us some examples of what intersectionality can look like. But maybe we can go right into this video that we found. Let me just
Sure.
share my screen. Desktop, come on. Here we go.
Good job.
So Miss Cheyenne Eve on Instagram found herself in a similar situation a week ago and made a video that I felt was absolutely amazing. And I'd like to share a portion of it with you guys. So let's take a look.
Make it into a short video that I can post here. So I'm going to be talking about intersectionality and positionality. So I have this, and this is going to kind of help me explain intersectionality. So we have you, and then we have all these different categories that affect you, that make you you. So we have your race, your gender, your sexuality, your ability, your class, your education or occupation. And there's so many more things that can make you you. Just for the purposes of this video, I just did these 6. So as you can see, these are all connected. So my race affects my educational opportunities and my occupation. My race also affects my class. And that's just because of, we'll talk about it later, but just systemic racism and all these things. So basically, I'll show you my little chart. So if we're looking at me, my race, I am Black. I am a woman. I am heterosexual. I am able-bodied, although I do experience mental illness in the form of anxiety and depression. I come from a lower middle class household, and I'm a college graduate who's currently unemployed, but I think that's because of Corona. So anyway, intersectionality is defined as the interlocking systems of oppression. It was coined, the term intersectionality was coined or founded by Kimberly Crenshaw, and she was looking at the experiences of Black women who were low class. So she was saying it's not just racism that affects these women, it's not just sexism or classism, it's all of these things that affect these women daily, like at all times of their lifetime. So basically, if we're looking at intersectionality, I experience all of these things. I am all of these things simultaneously every single day. So if we look at the fact that I'm Black, I'm a woman, and I'm low class, for example, those are oppressive identities, right? So I experience oppression. Those are things that Kimberly Crenshaw was looking at. So I know what it feels like to experience oppression. However, I'm also heterosexual, I'm able-bodied, and I'm a college graduate. So I know what it feels like to experience privilege. So there has never been a time where I have feared that I would be part of a hate crime because of my sexuality, nor do I fear that someone's going to make an ableist comment about my physical body. This is kind of like the fact that I have anxiety or depression. It could be it's like an invisible disability. Some people don't call it one. It's challenging. I personally don't feel like my anxiety is debilitating. So I would not say that I have a disability. And I'm a college graduate, so I have a degree. I have a higher level of education, which will afford me plenty of opportunities that maybe someone who does not have the same degree does not have access to. So basically, all of these things that make us us, that's intersectionality, right? All these things. Now, if I'm looking at positionality, it's me here looking at all of these different things, okay? So I'm here, I'm looking at race. So yeah, I experience oppression, but when I look at, my I'll put this again. When I look at sexuality, I'm heterosexual. So I experience privilege, right? And so I could be homophobic, but I'm not going to be, because I know what oppression feels like, and I'm not going to be an oppressor. So I think that a big thing is that people feel like they can't be an advocate for people if they are not experiencing the same forms of oppression. And that's not the case at all. If anything, it's more of a reason, because, I know what oppression feels like. So again, I'm not going to be an oppressor. So if I witness homophobia or ableism or classism or any kind of ism or form of oppression, I, as someone who maybe experiences privilege in terms of that, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to use my privilege for good. I think that oftentimes, especially now, like when people hear privilege, they think that it's inherently bad, and it's not. I think that everyone experiences privilege in some way or another. And what's bad or wrong about privilege is if you don't acknowledge it and if you don't use that privilege for good. So,
amen. She just nailed it. Like not many people can do. Let me find very quickly the charts that you were co-creator of, which are actually wonderful. Yes.
Sylvia did a great job with those.
One of our most loved memes of all on Instagram was this one, and it was because of this that I kind of got to meet you and it got your attention. But there's many intersectionality slivers that can fit into all of this. And it says intersectionality is a lens through which we can see where power comes and collides, where it locks and intersects. It's the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experience of discrimination and privilege. Any thoughts on the video and of course your work?
Yeah, so my friend Sylvia made this particular image. I consulted on another one, but I love the essence of intersectionality because it is honoring the fact that our social identities, which are these categories, so race, ethnicity, gender identity, class, language, etc., these are our identities, our social identities. And the social identities are the ones that we don't necessarily choose, but the world is ascribing to us. Let's take race, for example. Racial identity is there are two components to it. So there's the race that I choose for myself, and then there's the racial identity category that others put onto me. So the idea of intersectionality is very closely linked to this idea of, like I said earlier, this nexus point. So that nexus point is where the power and the discrimination collide, as the definition says. So this idea, as the speaker was talking, of privileged and disadvantaged, or privileged and oppressed, we all have targeted and agent identities. It does matter in which lens we look through, and we all are socialized. We all have our different views of these different identities, right? So like you and I might have been raised one type of way to look at race or sexuality from a particular kind of lens, but it's really important to look at the identities of others and ourselves through an intersectional lens to understand that we're not just one thing. And you and I, just because we both may identify as cis women, we don't experience the world in the same way. And that's why I think intersectionality is so important, because it honors the lived experiences of folks. I think people think that others, let's take LGBT folks. I fall within that category. I identify as lesbian. And I think people think that I experience the world the same exact way as another lesbian. But we are not monolithic. We are not all experiencing the world the same way. And intersectionality gives us an opportunity to value and validate the way someone else moves through the world.
Oh. Beautifully said.
Oh, thank you.
So beautiful. Oh, I mean, I thought the video did a good job of explaining how there are things that bring us down, that are reasons for oppression to happen to us, but then there's also intersectionality slivers that are protective, that are privileged.
Absolutely.
And so she can be both oppressed and privileged. And what a beautiful duality in that. Because I
It
think,
really is.
for example, and we've talked about this in the show, I carry an enormous amount of white privilege because I am often invited to spaces where folks think and believe that I am a white lady, just another white lady. You know, they don't realize that this color comes from a box and then you can just put it on there. You know, it's kind of like being a chameleon, and suddenly you're in these other spaces, and what I'm witnessing and experiencing is a horrible, just disgusting behavior from people in positions of power, particularly politicians, who have no idea what the word even means.
Right. Well, I think folks forget that intersectionality is not necessarily our identity categories, but it's the way we look at those categories. You just shared a story about you being, I call it white passing. I experience the opposite, interestingly enough. So I'm from Connecticut and I live in California, and I am frequently read as a woman of color.
Damn.
And
sorry to hear that.
No, you know, it's something I still don't have a lot of words how to explain it, because it doesn't make me feel bad. It makes me feel like I am accepted into spaces that white people are often have to earn their place. And I am often invited into spaces that I haven't earned my space there, and is sort of just expected that I'll be there. So I have a lot of folks speak Spanish to me, and a lot of folks assume where I'm from, but I'm actually an Italian Jew from Connecticut. Like,
I just say that I love that. I just love that so much. I think it's also in how we utilize our privilege and our white passingness or our non-white passingness, because I think you, for example, provide so much great learning and education just to me. Like, for me to see your content was just like, oh my God, I need to meet this woman. Look at the topics that she's discussing for fun. You know, who knows? She's not monetizing on her Instagram, maybe not yet. But what a great way of putting it all together and explaining it to me or us and our followers. And also, you know, on the flip side of that, it's to bring these conversations to those spaces where people of color are not invited to.
Absolutely.
And that's how I, for example, try to use it all the time. I feel like I call it like a little bomb. It's like I'll wait till I'm all the way in, and then I'll be like, surprise! We're going to talk about oppression, and we're going to talk about all these things, and everyone's upset, and everyone is just like, what do you mean women are raped? And I'm like, yeah, they actually, here's some numbers, and it's real messed up, and it happens way too often, and even in these spaces, but we don't want to talk about it. And then that gets shunned when it happens, but I enjoy every minute of it.
So do I. And what you're talking about, so the video talked about this idea of advocacy, right? So we've got these 3, 4, 5 terms that people throw around. We have allyship. A lot of folks like to consider themselves an ally, which to me implies it's a noun and a label you can claim for yourself. I don't agree with that term. I believe that practicing allyship is what we should be doing, or advocating for groups that aren't in the room, or we need to be championing. There it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a hard word.
Yeah.
Or being a co-conspirator. So there are a variety of different ways that you can consider yourself one of these things. And for me, if I'm invited to a table, my job, it's funny that you say you're like a bomb. I consider myself a disease, and I like to infiltrate. And I'm being strategic. I get into spaces and I will meet people where they are and gently bring them along. And I will also push them outside of their comfort zone, because I have the privilege as a white woman to do so. And it is my job as a white woman to walk through doors and bring other women of color, specifically Black, Brown, Indigenous women of color, along with me.
This is why I love you.
Thank you. I love you too.
This is the reason. This is it.
I'll be honest with
we
you.
Got it.
What?
We got it. We captured the reason right there.
Yes. Well, and I'll be honest, this is not an easy journey for folks, especially folks who hold any kind of privilege. It is really hard when you have privilege or you come from an oppressed or disadvantaged group. The oppression Olympics like to start happening, and it's you're not as oppressed as I am, or you don't have as much disadvantage as me. But the reality is intersectionality should be talked about in honoring that your oppression and my oppression is connected, and your liberation and my liberation is connected. I can't be free until you're free. So intersectionality should be the theory, the frame, the lens, the way in which we are looking at liberation. If I'm not liberated by your liberation, we're going nowhere. So dismantling systems and taking apart sexism, taking apart white supremacy, these are things that are going to liberate not just non-BIPOC, but also BIPOC. It's going to liberate all of us. I said that wrong. Non-white. No, white.
Start from the beginning.
I have no idea.
I got lost.
You got lost. I got lost. Let me think for a second. So liberating, right? So I'm working towards liberation, not of myself. I'm working towards liberation of the groups around me that are oppressed, whatever group that is. And my liberation is tied into their liberation. So I can't be free until they're free, period.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you.
A lot of people ask me all the time, how come you get so passionate about standing up for Black people?
Why wouldn't you?
Or why do you get so passionate about standing up for, disabled folks? Or why do you get so passionate about LGBT issues? And I'm like, because if you're willing to hate them, you will be willing to hate me. And even from a self-serving, selfish standpoint, we can't allow that to happen. Right. And I'm going to ask, a demand for work to the community is please stand up for people that you see being bullied or oppressed around you, because odds are that today it's you, but tomorrow's going to be them, or the other way around. Like today it was them, and then maybe tomorrow it's you, or the week after. It doesn't matter. But hatred, once you hate one thing, how do you limit that, right? Like how I only hate women? No. People who only hate women also bash LGBT folks or find other ways of bashing a different group. I know in Hispanic circles, especially right now, we have this crazy idea that folks who come from the Caribbean islands feel very white. Very, very white. And I keep trying to explain to them, like, that you may feel white inside of yourself. However, society's not going to interpret you that way. Because of your skin, because of your accent, because of the way that you speak, because of the way that you present yourself, all of these things. People know where you're from. So you can't side with the oppressor. That's only going to make it worse for you. Another thing is that we need to work on our solidarity.
Absolutely.
In this area. I think everywhere, right? Just in general. And not everyone is a big aggressive advocate, right? Yep. There's different levels of advocacy, from creating awareness to having conversations like these to a little bit more direct action, which is what's happening right now all over the world. And it finally got to the United States. What a beautiful thing to see. Amen.
Amen. And all of these, you're so good. So solidarity leads to liberation, and all of the different types of advocacy or activism is important. We need folks who are speaking out on social media. We also need them doing self-work at home. We need people having conversations around the dinner table about oppression. We need to have people having conversations around the dinner table about police brutality. We need people talking to their students, like myself, about anti-Blackness. And I work at a Hispanic serving institution, an HSI here in California. And it is very common. My students know very little about anti-Blackness and police brutality. And when I bring up these conversations, they haven't heard it. They haven't talked about it. There's no space for that. And it's on us as educators, whatever that means, however educator is defined to you, to bring up these conversations, because protests are one form of activism. There's social media, there's having difficult conversations in your family, there's listening to these podcasts and then going out and educating somebody else. It's something I call the ripple effect. In my workshops, in my work, if I can affect one person, if I can talk to one person and they shift their mindset a little bit, I've done my job.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And you actually said something that made me think of Audre Lorde's most famous quote, which is, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." And go ahead, sorry.
No, that's one of my favorite writers. Continue.
That's one of my favorite quotes. I have it blown up in a poster that I haven't put up yet because we just moved, but it's true. We have to not rely on the master's tools, and we need to dismantle the house with new tools, new tactics, new ways of existing. We need to reimagine the way in which we work in the world and how we want our solidarity and liberation to look going forward.
Oh, I would love to ask you more about that, because I've always not disagreed about that, but boy, is it delicious. Utilize the same tools against the oppressor, and boy, do they get upset about it.
Yes, they do.
But that's just me and Karma working together. Can you give us some examples, if you can think of any, of new tools? Instagram is a brand new tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so it's interesting. Let's take the Instagram example for a second. My dissertation research showed that white people, specifically white women, use Instagram as a tool to educate themselves. So it is a tool, and I will say the accounts that are working to educate are being flagged by Instagram and Facebook. Facebook now owns Instagram. And so we have to come up with new and creative ways to get the information out. But Instagram, 100%, social media, TikTok has a lot of different accounts that are dedicated to education around white supremacy, for instance. I think another new tool is owning the language. So rather than just saying race, actually talking about what that means and what's connected to race. So for me, saying white supremacy as a white person is dismantling with a new tool, because the system, white supremacy, doesn't want me to know what that is and doesn't want me to be critical of it. So for me, I am picking up a new tool out of my tool belt and saying, I'm going to say this word, even if it makes you uncomfortable.
Especially because it makes you uncomfortable.
Because it makes you uncomfortable. I'm going to keep saying it. A great story about that is I wrote it in my dissertation. People were uncomfortable. And I said, okay, I'm going to write it more. Because that's what it is. So let's call a spade here, people.
Look at that. I mean, we can basically end here, because that everything that I wanted to talk about. Okay. Thank you so much for even being willing to have these conversations. It is hard to say, yeah, let's record it and put it online. And I've gotten some pushback, and some folks who are wonderfully articulate around it don't feel comfortable, right? And so I want to thank you, first of all, for being here. Can you tell me a little bit more about your business and what you do?
Sure.
Specifically, what's the name of your business? Who do you want to see? Who's your best client?
Oh, my best client. Yeah, well, first, thank you. And yeah, it is hard to have these conversations. It is a little scary knowing your words can be used against you someday, but you know what? Whatever. I'm at the point where if they're coming for me, they're coming for me.
Well, they're definitely coming. That's yep.
Right. Just when? When are they coming?
They are.
So my business is a couple of different things folded into one. So I'm a coach, a consultant, and an educator. What that means is I work with organizations, nonprofits, and corporations, like, I won't give you any names, but like tech companies, et cetera. And I consult for them, typically out of their HR department, and I work with clients around diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So whether that be planning trainings, talking to folks, so the counseling part of it, the coaching part of it comes in when I do listening sessions or when I host workshops, all centered around these ideas of social justice, racial justice, ecological justice. And we start small, and the work is my favorite. I really enjoy helping folks internally and externally. So I do a lot of the people operations, working with the staff on language or languaging, or being more aware of themselves and how they present in the world. And then the coach part of it is the one-on-one coaching. I offer that privately for private clients, or for CEOs, organization leaders. And then within some of my consulting work, I also am providing coaching for CEOs or presidents of colleges. So I work in higher education as well. And then I also am running a Patreon, which is a monthly fee for folks. And I'm calling them lessons and sort of videos like this, kind of like lecture style, live feeds. And that's what I do.
Ooh, how can people get a hold of you? What is your Instagram, please?
It is Dr. Victoria, my first name, and then Verlezza, my last name, and it's spelled Verlezza. So you can get a hold of me there. Everything is linked. My email address, my Patreon, my website, and I offer the Patreon as a supplement to my consulting. Consulting can feel really out of reach for a lot of folks. So what I've done with this Patreon account is providing the same level of engagement for every tier. So anybody who becomes a member can pay any amount that they want, but they will have complete access to me and the material for whatever price they choose.
Wow.
It's about equity.
There you have it, you guys. If you have any follow-up questions, we may even have to do another intersectionality podcast. But in the event that anyone has questions, you can submit them directly to me at getaeonhelp@gmail.com. That's GETAEONHELP@gmail.com. And we're happy to continue discussing, or you could go to our Facebook or our Instagram at Aeon Counseling. Thank you for being here and saying everything that you just said. We have been blessed by you today, and tune in. We're going to continue these conversations, and in our next podcast, we actually have more Juggernauts that are killing it right now. So stay tuned. Thank you.